behavior of animals depends on a particular habitat where they belong or will they inhabit. So there are actually behavioral variations in natural populations due to variation of habitat. So when behavioral variation within species corresponds to variation in the environment, it may be evidence of the past evolution. Okay, so there is actually the learning process and of course the influence of the changes in the environment that hones that particular behavioral variations among natural populations of organisms. So differences in pre-selection, for example, in some populations are due to prey availability and are evidence of the behavioral evolutions, especially if you're talking with animals that are of specialists or generalists. When you say specialists, these are organisms or animals that feed on a specific type of food, while those animals that are considered generalists are animals that consume a wide variety of food. Okay, so for example, if you have this figure, a funnel spider, so in the field, for example, there is a variation of its time attack. If there are two types of population. For example, you have the desert population, you have the riparian population. So these are um, two types of habitat where this particular species can be found. So in this case, if you have in the field, so the attack time for desert spiders are more shorter than the attack time of um, spiders that can be or collected or observed in the riparian population. This has something to do with, I think, with the temperature. It is because in the desert environment, it's most likely have increased or higher temperature than in riparian population or riparian vegetation. So most probably that the temperature of the environment makes them more or less active in terms of attacking or acquiring its food. So in order to validate this particular result, so in this particular experiment, they try to raise them in the lab for first generation and the second generation. And as you can see, the pattern is still the same, although there are fluctuations from the first generation in the lab raised animals and the second generation, but the trend is still the same. So it's or the riparian population of the spider still needs higher time for attack or acquiring its food as compared to desert population. Okay. So in terms of acquiring food in behavioral ecology, there is a particular theory on how do animals acquire their food. So this is what we so called optimal foraging theory. In this theory, it actually states, or in layman's term or a shorter term, it actually states that animals do weigh the cost and benefits of acquiring food. It is because there are presence of other competitors and of course the other animals that can be of or can be a predator for these animals. So in this particular theory, it views foraging behavior as a compromise between benefits of nutrition and the cost of obtaining food. Okay. For example, if you have this graph here, it shows the average number of drops in the total flight height. Okay. So the optimal flight height in foraging behavior correlated with a fewer number of drops. Okay. Fewer number of drops indicating a trade-off between the energy gained uh, for food that is being expend or it's being the energy that is being expended in order to get its own food. Okay. So in this particular level, so it has higher average number of drops as compared to this particular level. So most probably this particular point here is actually the preferred drop height for this particular species of crow. Okay, so in this case, um, this particular organism tend to get the benefits, larger benefits than the cost. In this case, the benefit is the source of food, and the cost for that is the energy that is being used by this animal to get the food and have this particular drop length. Okay. For this particular example, again, uh, proving the optimal foraging theory, you have the bluegill sunfish, and the prey selection is related to its diameter of its prey. Okay, for example, you have the small prey called distance, small prey, middle distance, and the large prey, which is a far distance. Okay, so there are two observed patterns in terms of the selection of food. If there is low prey density, so as you can see, there is an equal or um, nearly equal consumption, okay, of these different sizes of prey if there is low density. But if there is high density of prey, okay, available for that particular species, the bluegill sunfish, so it tends to select larger prey than smaller prey. So in this case, the selection happens, okay, the preference of the animal happens when there is high density of the food that is available. However, if there is low density of food available, it tends to consume, or it has the same consumption or similar consumption regardless of the size of its food. Okay. Okay. As you can see, this is another graph showing the optimal foraging theory. You have the predation occurrence, the relative deer use, and you have the location. So in this case, the predation risk is actually found in what? In the forage edge habitat, okay, and lower risk in the forest interior and the open space. However, in terms of deer use, okay, habitat edge habitat edge or forest edge habitat and forest interior have the same, but the higher relative deer use can be found in open area. Okay, so most likely the deers can tend to acquire food on this particular area, secondary to the forest interior and of course the forest edge habitat. Okay, so in this case, they are looking onto the predation risk. Okay, since you have the forest interior and the open area, which is considered the lower risk for predations, and then the deer tend to choose between these two, so it chooses open area. It is because primarily it has the low predation risk in this case, and of course you will expect in open area there are a lot of grasses or plants that can be or are that are edible or considered food by the deer. So you would expect in this particular portion, this is a higher relative deer use as compared to the forest interior. Okay. So aside from food or acquiring food, there are also other behaviors of animals in terms of mating and mate choice. So mating behavior is a product of a form of natural selection called sexual selection, in which animals tend to choose their mate depending on their criteria or qualifications, or depending on their preference. Okay, it could either be the display of colors, or depending on how they actually uh, compete with other individuals. So most likely, um, they have their own, or animals, or different animals have unique way of displaying this particular characteristic for them to be chosen as a probable mate of a particular partner. So in many species, mating is promiscuous, so with no strong pair bands or lasting relationship. So, ayan, naghihiwalay din sila. So for mating behavior and mate choice, you have monogamous relationship. So one male mates only one female. So this is exclusive. Okay, there is an exclusive relationship on one male organism and one female organism. However, there are animals that are considered polygyny. So for one male, um, there are many females, and males are often more showy and larger than females. Okay, so in this case, they tend to reproduce a large number of individuals, okay, because of the large number or um, several females that are bred, or um, several females which are mate partner of one single male. So polyandry, which is opposite or opposite of polygyny, one female naman with many males. Females are often more showy than males. Okay. So in this case, kasi if you look into its advantage, um, there is actually what we so called looking for a unique set of genes from the males that is can be useful for the next generation of the offspring, okay, or that can be inherited by the offspring in order for these particular groups of species to exist in the next generation. So there is a probability or higher probability that they can, or the next generation can gain that uh, strong characteristic or unique characteristic, helping them to survive in the next generations. Okay. So aside from mating choice, there is what we so called, or animals also develop what we so called parental care. So the certain of paternity influence parental care in mating behavior. In some species that produce large number of offspring, parental care is at least as likely to be carried out by males as of females, just like of this particular example, we have fish. Okay. So there are also tendencies that because of high or because of good parental care, um, some of the organisms tend to um, have reproductive success in terms of the survival of the offspring as compared to those organisms that do not have a good parental care. And of course, parental care has something to do with its learning experience in the past, and of course, can be part of what we so called evolution and natural selection. So, in parental care, the needs of the young are an important factor constraining the evolution of mating system. Bakit siya nagiging uh, constraint or major factor as a constraint for evolution of mating system? It is because it takes time for a particular partner or a particular organism with a particular partner or mate um, to have their mating process. It is because one is taking care of its young. So, so um, nawawala pa yung process ng mating system. It is because nako-compromise nung parental care process. Okay. So in sexual selection and mate choice, in intersexual selection, members of one sex choose mates on the basis of particular characteristics. So intrasexual selection naman involves competition among members of one sex for mates. So magkaiba po yung intersexual at intrasexual selection. This is an example of a zebra finch. So male are more ornate Okay, so complex coloration that may affect mate choice by the female. So you can actually see that this is particular male zebra finch. Okay, so um, there is a particular in this process. There's particularly in the intersexual selection. There is a competition of male, and such competition may involve agonistic behavior and often ritualized contest that determines which competition gains access to a resource. Okay, a resource which can be offered to a particular mate or a female individual. Okay, so this is a recognition of the strength of the male who wins that particular competition and provides the idea that this particular mate, okay, has a strong genes or a strong um, genotype which can be passed on to the offspring for the success of in the survival of the offspring for the next generation. So most likely that's the implication of that. Okay, so in sexual selection, the mate and mate choice, the imprinting process is also very important. So imprinting of female chicks on males with more ornamentation affects mate selection as adults. So for example, if you have this particular experiment, ayan, so both parents are ornamented, males ornamented, and you have females ornamented. So we have a control group, parents are not ornamented. So females reared by ornamented parents or ornamented fathers preferred ornamented males. Dito naman, females reared by ornamented mothers and non-ornamented parents showed no preference either of the ano. So, with the characteristic of the parents that they see or they imprinted to this young, they most likely search for mate that which are or which greatly represents their parents. So most likely that is the role of imprinting in sexual selection and mate choice. So ito yung sinasabi ko that there is a male competition, especially in intrasexual selection, which can reduce variation among males. Okay, so they try to compete for their partner. Okay, aside from that, they try to compete for a resource which can be offered for their possible partners or the females. Um, this one can be applied to what we so called game theory. So in game theory, where the outcome depends on each individual's strategy and the strategy of other individuals. So they tend to develop a particular strategy in order to win a particular um, competition. Okay, and that unique characteristic will be developed in the next generation as um, that particular male species or male individual wins the competition. Okay, so sexual selection and mate choice, polymorphism and abundance of males, okay, is very important to mating success. In this example, we have the male side-blotched lizard with different forms. So mating success of male side-blotched lizard was found to be influenced by male polymorphism. As you can see, there are changes in terms of the coloration of their body. Okay, and of course, their abundance itself of different males in a given area. Okay, so mate choice copying is a behavior in which individual in a population copy the mate choice of the other. Kumbaga, it's being laid as a different um, or there is a particular variation, but in this case, this is only one species. Okay, so it they presents a large variation in terms of the phenotype, but um, uh, strictly speaking, they are only of one species. Okay. So, the same with polymorphism, we have also made choice copying yung sinasabi ko. that some of the possible mate copy the characteristic of other mates, which can be chosen by others or the possible female. For example, if you have these guppies, you have female guppies prefer males with more orange coloration, so they tend to copy, males tend to copy that particular unique features. Okay, so female guppy, there are also female guppies that prefer less um, coloration. So that particular preference of females tend to be um, copied by prospective female individuals, or should I say male individuals. Okay, so in behavioral ecology also we have what we so called altruistic social behavior. So when you say altruism, okay, there are some individuals behave in such a way that they try to reduce their individual fitness, but they try to increase the fitness of others. Kumbaga, it is being non-selfish behavior. Okay, they tend to help other organisms to survive, okay, in their expense. Kumbaga. So that's altruism. So altruistic social behavior or altruistic behavior can be explained by inclusive fitness. Okay? So when you say inclusive fitness, that is fitness that um, is or inclusive fitness, ibig sabihin, they try and tend to um, help other organism to develop their own fitness, okay, kahit na sila mismo ang nahihirapan. Okay? So, hindi siya exclusive but inclusive. So, they can actually both develop that particular fitness for survival. Okay? Then, one, one group of organism tend to help other group in order to increase also their fitness. So, it's not exclusive but inclusive. So, that is altruistic behavior. So in altruistic social behavior, okay, so there are three variables in an altruistic act. First is the benefit to the recipient. Okay, so the benefit most likely of other group, okay, which receives um, help from other group of individuals, and of course the cost of to the altruist. So what are the costs behind that particular behavior of helping others? And of course the coefficient of relatedness. So the coefficient of relatedness is the probability that two relatives may share the same genes. Okay, so for example, if you have parent A and parent B, so A could have parent A could have this sibling or this sibling, okay, or this particular sibling which is the same with parent B. Okay, so that is coefficient of relatedness. Okay. So altruistic behavior is also related to what we so-called kin selection, um, which is part of natural selection. So kin selection favors the kind of altruistic behavior by enhancing reproductive success of other relatives. So for example, if you have um, uh, this organism, okay, most likely rodent. So males have a borrowing distance increasing borrowing distance as they age. However, lower lang yung borrow distance ng female as they age. So, these are squirrels pala. So, warning behavior. Okay, so as they age, they tend to go high or farther than its burrow in order to have or to conduct warning if there are predators that are coming. Okay? So altruistic behavior towards unrelated individuals can be adapted if aided individual returns the favor in the future. So there is actually the same learning process as humans, so animals do have that. Okay? So we have what we called reciprocal altruism. So even though they are far from being related, but animals do learn that um, even though they're that particular animal who helped them or helped them actually of different species, but they tend to learn that um, what they did is helping process for the survival of that animal. So they tend to reciprocate that with good behavior or helping behavior. So that is reciprocal altruism. So kumbaga kung i-ano niya yan, that is, kung ano yung ginawa mo maganda, it will be reciprocated with another good act. Which is can be seen in humans as part of what we so called social learning. Kaya nga, for social learning forms the roots of culture. The best example for that are human behavior. So culture can be defined as a system of information transferred to observation or teaching, which again is applicable most likely to humans. Okay, so that is behavioral ecology.